Hello and welcome to another episode of Tinker Time with WB7 VPC. Consider this. The following video contains shop language. If this offends you, it is best to leave now. Well, hello and welcome yet again. Today we have something a little bit different than what I had originally planned for this video. As evidenced by the fluke meter and all my leads dangling out in the breeze there. I was going to try and do some diagnostic work on this Kenwood MC-60 mic that I picked up off of eBay about 6 or 7 months ago. Really right after I bought my TS590 Sugar Golf. I like desk mics. I have one for my Yaesu radio for my bass here, and they just work really well for me. And I really wanted one for my Kenwood, but they were so expensive that I thought that I would take a gamble when I saw this one come up on eBay and hope that it might just be a little bit crusty and would be usable. Maybe not beautiful, but usable. So when I first got it and plugged it into my radio, it had what I assumed to be a short. It would automatically start transmitting. Audio was going through it. It was working, but I couldn't get the transmit to turn off. So I figured, like I said, there must be a short in it. There must be something going on in the guts of it because it had been rode hard and put away wet. So I just parked it and sat it up on the power supply in my shop up above my radio and figured that it would just be a decorative kind of a thing. And I'd actually recorded a video where I went through and verified that all the mic cables were good and there were no shorts, and checked out the PCB board and checked everything out that I could and cleaned things up on the inside a little bit, and fixed a solder bridge and figured that, that was going to be the video that ended up being posted. And I brought it back into my radio and plugged it in, and lo and behold, everything was working great. And I figured that that was going to be the end of it until I turned on the button on top of the radio labeled on off, at which point it immediately started transmitting nonstop, and I couldn't get it to turn off no matter what buttons I was pushing on the base itself. And then the light bulb flicked, and I realized just how stupid I was, and that is kind of what this video turned out to be, was an exercise in examining. Sorry, the dogs are going to be banging on doors and whatnot up top, so we'll just have a little bit of background noise here and there. When I first got the microphone, I thought that it had to be turned on to work on the microphone itself, and that was not the case. The on locks it on. So this had been sitting for X number of months thinking that it was broken, and I spent 2 hours going through all of the guts on it. I fixed a couple of solder bridges that were in there, but really were irrelevant, it turns out. It was complete operator error. It was 100% me behind the microphone not knowing what I was doing that led me to believe that there was this problem. So instead of this video going through and diagnosing all of the things that were right with the radio, I figured that I would just come back in and record me cleaning it up and maybe talk about that a little bit, and get a bit of understanding of, or my thoughts on, me being an idiot for one, but two, not letting that be all that discouraging, because it happens to everyone if they're trying something new or different, which, if you're doing radio like this or building things in the shop or whatever the case might be, sooner or later there's going to be an, oh my God, I can't believe that I just did that moment. And you'll feel like a horse's ass and then continue along with your merry way. Unless you decide that you're just going to give up and not learn anything from mistakes and take it personal, which I did for a moment with this. When I first got it, I was so frustrated that it wasn't working the way that it was supposed to that I almost threw it away. But I decided to keep it just because it looked cool. It was a fairly vintage piece of software or hardware. Like I said, it's been around for a while. When I was cleaning it, I wiped off the serial number for it, but it was something 3,000, maybe 945, something like that. So, it's relatively old, and from looking at it in its original condition, I mean, you can see throughout this video all of the dirt and schmutz on it. Whoever had this before had spilled something on it and had used it hard. It was a used microphone. It wasn't some new old stock like that. It had been used as it should be. The little rubber feet on the base of it were so degraded from whatever had spilled on it that they were falling apart into teeny tiny little pieces and splitting as I was working with them. It looked to me as though something had corroded some of the green color on the PCB and had leaked out and was on the base of the microphone. The battery tray holder on the interior for the preamp is broken. So when I looked at all of these things initially, I was really convinced that this was just a broken microphone, that things were going to be beyond my ability to heal. And it wasn't until a few months later I was able to come back to it with more of a level head. In coming back to it like that, I was able to separate some of the emotion from it, not feel quite as betrayed over spending money on this device that I was so certain was going to work so well, and was angry that it didn't. Was able to take a breather and approach it from the ground up. Now, what I should have done would be to just plug the thing into the radio again and play around with things, and then I probably would have realized that I didn't need that on-off switch to be turned on to make the microphone work, and maybe would have alleviated a lot of trouble with it right from the beginning. But that's what hindsight's for, and hindsight is what you learn from. It's what you use, so the next time a similar problem presents itself, you don't jump to any conclusions, or you don't spend time doing work that you don't necessarily need to do. This microphone could have easily been working the very first day that I got it. Mine is just the skeeve of it from being so dirty. But if, I had the knowledge that I do now, I would have, just been able to spend half an hour or so cleaning it up and making it shine again, and I would have had it on the air much sooner than I did. There is a tendency, or I have a tendency, and it seems like it's out there a bit in the radio community, in this kind of a hobby, in building things, that you automatically are just supposed to know everything that you need to do. that if you really studied your license manual, if you really learned what the content was for the tests or what the content might be of, say, the operator's manual from ARRL or something like that, that you're going to have a full and complete understanding over how everything is supposed to work. And that's not the case. I find that is rather simplistic. And, the people who really know, the people who we ask questions of, maybe the people that you talk to on repeaters or on the HF or whatever the case may be, they probably have a lot of experience. And I don't ever begrudge those who are asking questions with the intent of learning, because we've all been there at one point or another. Some of us might have a little bit more time. Some of them might have a little bit more time and a bit more experience, where a seemingly simple question asked of them seems common sense. And that's not necessarily the case for the person asking the question, or else they probably wouldn't be asking the question. The day before I recorded this video and went back out into the shop to start messing around with this microphone some more, was the ARRL single sideband contest. What's it called? The Sprint. I can't remember the real name of it, but the point is the story. I was running 100 watts through a G5 or GR5E, G5RV. Anyway, one of the little junior antennas, and had switched from 20 meters to 40. There were a lot of pileups on 20 that I just wasn't able to get through. I did get through on a lot of them. Out of my 25 contacts or so, probably 20 of them were on 20. But I decided to jump over to 40 and start working. And it was I worked this contest once before with the person who got me on the air on HF to begin with, up in Dillon, my hometown. And I really wasn't super comfortable working at this time around. I was completely by myself, and it's a different format. It's not something that I typically do. So, it was taking me a fair bit to get in the groove of it. And contact number 15 was this fellow out of Arizona, I believe, or Nevada, one of the states, just a hop, skip, and a jump from me. And he was having a really hard time digging me out of the dirt on 40, which is understandable. I don't have the best setup in the world, and it was just difficult. I kept giving him his serial and my check, and we kept going back and forth with each other over, you are serial 15, I say to him. Okay, what is your check? He would come back to me, and I would say 15 United Tango. I got licensed in 2015, and I'm in Utah, so 15 UT. And he would come back and say, what's my serial? And I would say 15 is your serial. And I was very clear what I was saying, but he was getting really frustrated with me. And then it finally clicked that, okay, I'm serial number 15, and your check is 2015 Utah. Okay, there we go. And this other fellow comes on right afterwards and mentioned that, it sounded like this guy was getting ready to pull his hair out working me. And that, in the grand scheme of things, it didn't really have that much impact. But at the same time, it made me ponder the motivations behind all of this. And it kind of spurred on this voiceover that I'm doing for this video is, we're watching me clean up this old ratty microphone. Instead of working through the problem, or assuming that someone's still on frequency and maybe listening in, they went on this little bit of a diatribe about what a crappy operator I was. But they didn't provide any kind of helpful criticism. It was more of a nitpicky condescension. And it made me look back on a lot of the interactions that I've had on HF or on local repeaters or whatever the case may be with radio, where we have knowledgeable people. This person that I'd worked was up into the thousands in his serial. He had obviously been, operating the whole contest. It was a multi-operator station. They were contesting. That was their purpose. They weren't in it. They were trying to score. They weren't just having fun like I was. But it made me think, if you're willing to share some information with somebody, or you're willing to be a bit accommodating, share some knowledge that you have, it makes everyone a better operator, because maybe that next person that's listening behind me, behind the next guy who's trying to break in, that person might have a better understanding of what they need to do to be successful with this. I hear it a lot on the repeaters around here, and it's honestly why I don't really listen to a lot of them anymore, where there's this sense of elitism among the operators. And this goes for young people, for younger licensed people. They've only been licensed for a couple of years, up to those that have been licensed for decades. The elitism tends to creep in, and you maybe have an interaction where somebody's asking for help, and the person coming back has a tone that questions the intent of the person asking. It's really disheartening, but they'll have a idea, or they'll come back and say, well, you should know this. This is in your test. Didn't you study for it? And let's be honest here. A lot of people that are licensed maybe don't have as much of a technical background to begin with, and they're just picking it up as they go, much like I did. And I'm no expert in anything. I'm still a novice. I know enough to be able to get on the air, and I know enough to be able to troubleshoot some things, but I didn't have enough knowledge to realize that my microphone didn't need to be turned on to transmit, and caused myself some difficulties there. If anyone says that they haven't had an experience like that, they're lying. And maybe it's not something as simple as their microphone being turned on and thinking that it's a short circuit because it's transmitting the way it's supposed to. But everybody's had a moment, if you're doing this kind of stuff, where you look back and realize, wow, I feel like an idiot right now because I didn't figure that out right away. And if anyone says they haven't, they're either lying to themselves, or they're flat lying to the person they're talking to. These kinds of things that we're doing are really difficult, and we can't assume that everyone has an inborn knowledge of how radios work, or how to build an aluminum rack in their home shop, with hand tools. you've got to learn as you go along, and we've also got to remember that folks, normally are trying to learn as they go along. Of course, there's some people that are just not willing to learn and they cause problems for us, but that isn't the majority of people in my experience. So if I come across someone or someone comes across me who's having something going on, I'll, do my best to help them out, because maybe I would have a similar question if I didn't have the experience that I do. And believe you me, I don't find myself to be all that experienced. I've only been doing this radio stuff for 3 years as an amateur. I have a deeper experience with public service and commercial kind of stuff, but that's a little bit different story. It can be a much different story. So I'm always gracious to those who've helped me out. Like I said, that first person who got me on HF had me over to his house over the sweepstakes single sideband contest a few years ago. I think it was even before I got licensed. I can't remember if maybe I had just got my technician license, but I was still really new to this whole world. I'd never touched an HF radio before. I had no conception of what I was doing, but he took the time to sit down with me and teach me the basics anyway. And that translated over the course of a few years to the point where when I fire up my HF rig and I work a contest, I at least know where to look for the rules. I know where to look for the exchange information, and I have a basic understanding of what to do with it. And I've been able to set up my own station, largely by myself with, some help here and there as needed, and things work pretty well. So, if you get discouraged off of one mistake, or you get discouraged because something doesn't go quite the way you expect it to, it's kind of selling everything short with this hobby, or with anything that you might partake of. There's always going to be the elitists, and there's always going to be the people that are judging. But if we can get to a point where we remember a little bit better that everyone's learning, everyone's trying to understand a little bit better what they're doing, then that makes things much more enjoyable for everyone. And it seems that that degree of civility is, it's still certainly there, and I'm ranting in regards to, a handful of interactions that I've had. By and large, the community, whichever community you find yourself in, they're going to be very willing to help you out. There's a lot of resource out there, especially these days where we have access to the internet and basically the collected knowledge of a lot of people who are involved in stuff that we might find interesting. It makes it far easier. It also makes it a little bit harder because it's easy to be a keyboard commando or hide behind a microphone and be condescending or derogatory towards somebody who's trying to sort things out on their own. But I think if we all take a step back and remember that all of us are just trying to figure this out in our own way, it will make things far easier on everyone and make it a better experience for everyone too. We're not all experts. Anyone who pretends to be an expert has got a hole in their knowledge somewhere that they need to learn about. And we can all benefit from listening in on our collected knowledge and sharing it with each other. So a little bit different video. Hope everyone enjoyed it, I guess, and we will catch you next time, where hopefully we'll be doing something a little bit more substantial in the shop. So 7-3, and thanks for watching.